convener of Stop the War Coalition, Lindsey German. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, in your last article, you say that popular support for war and military interventions, which have marked the history of the British Empire and are a constant feature of imperialism, is actually a myth. Turkey also, Pupils of Peace, the AKP wants war as a widespread slogan. In this context, is it possible to say that your claim applies to people all over the world?
I think that you need to look at the impact, and you know very well, and people in Turkey know very well, the impact of war on people. And of course, it's a horrific impact that people are killed, people are wounded. But even if that hasn't happened to you, the element of fear, of stress to your mental health, your physical health, displacement from your home, becoming a refugee, which has happened to many, many people this century because of wars, leaving aside what's happened historically. So I think lots and lots of people around the world, the initial instinct is for peace. And once you've been through a war, then people are very, very much, their instinct is for peace, and they don't want this warmongering. And in Britain, which, as you know, is a major imperialist power, although there is a sizable minority, including in the ruling party and indeed in the opposition party, which is prepared to defend all these wars, you find that they're really, a lot of the time, are really quite unpopular. And even when wars start off popular, for example, at the First World War, you find that as the reality of war becomes obvious to people, they become more and more unpopular.
There are those who think that poverty is exploited by states and poor people are included in war in various ways. For example, it is claimed that some states invest in African countries and requires mercenaries from these countries. Do you have any ideas or observations regarding this issue?
Well, there is a massive war industry, and there's a massive amount of arms sales. There's money which is available to pay mercenaries to continue conflicts, and this is obviously something which certain governments and certain of certainly the imperialist powers, they often take the decision that this is what they're going to do. The problem is it has been an absolute catastrophe for people in those parts of Africa. It's been a similar catastrophe in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and elsewhere. So, and in parts of Latin America, if you look around the world, there's quite a lot of wars or, some kind of military conflict going on. And I think it's, we have to tie the things together. It's not just a sort of accident that these happen. It is connected with the economics of imperialism. It is connected with the militarism of imperialism. And of course, it's connected with the desire of the major imperial powers to extend their influence into different parts of the world. So I would put it in that context.
As you have mentioned many times before, one of the most inevitable consequences of war is refugees. What are your predictions regarding the refugee issue? How much more could Europe avoid facing this problem, which played a major role in refugee crisis?
Well, of course, Europe could do massively more. I mean, it could stop engaging in these wars in the first place, which would mean that people's lives would not be disrupted, and far fewer of them would want to come to this country and to other countries. But there's also, the American military did a study a few years ago, and they said, where do you think the next wars are going to come from? Where are the next conflicts going to come from? And what they highlighted was that there would be wars over shortages of food, climate change, shortages of water. In other words, that people would be, and keeping people out of countries, because obviously people, for example, with climate change, if you can no longer produce agriculture or fishing in the way that you did, and you have to leave your home in order to find work, this will be one of the results. So we've got a big issue here, which is a global issue, and it has to be dealt with as a global issue. And what strikes me as amazing, really, is that when you look at Europe, population of Europe around 500 million in the European Union, the so-called migrant crisis, what in 2016, there were 1 million migrants. Now, 500 million can easily absorb 1 million, particularly when they're mostly young, mostly going to be doing work, mostly contributing to the economy. I don't think that that's a problem. And I think we have to look at it in this way, instead of which it's looked at as a major problem, as an issue which the racists very clearly organize around and deliberately organize around it, and exacerbate people's fears and people's misunderstanding about what's happening with migrants. So I think we need a huge program of education for people in Western Europe about what migration is and what it amounts to and how positive it can be. I think we also need to campaign for the rights of migrants, not only to come to these rich countries escaping war and poverty and all the other things, but also their right to be treated decently and equally when they get here.
Dear Lindsey German, convener of Stop the War Coalition, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.